I'm going to show you how fast. I mean, I think this is pretty obvious, right? How fast
In the
it
last
drains.
episode
Now,
of
the
Building
panel system, I
Resilience,
can't show
we were
you
doing some weird science
because
that
it's all
wasn't really
closed up.
science.
But in the event of a rain, if there was a rain event and water got behind any part of this system, the entire thing can drain out the bottom.
We also had a technical engineering Zoom conference, and better still, we installed the open joint cladding system from AZEK.
This is a PVC deck board, which we're repurposing as a cladding material. And it kind of makes sense because it's already designed to withstand the elements. It's designed to be walked on. It's designed to basically be beat up. And we're putting it in a spot where it's going to get a lot less weather, a lot less UV. It's going to get no foot traffic at all, and should last an incredibly long time.
Another thing that's going to last an incredibly long time are the 3/4 inch AZEK sheets with Paint Pro technology. Because they're PVC, they're virtually rot-proof, so they're even being used as a below-grade protection board for the foundation
So
insulation.
the codes require that we install what they call protection board over the insulation of our foundations. Now here in Minnesota, we are putting 3 inches of insulation on the exterior of our homes. So there's my insulation, and my insulation comes up out of grade. So how do we protect the insulation? Well, the codes ask us to put something called a protection board on. They don't define what it is. They don't give it any specifications. They just say protection board. So we got to find something that we can put in the ground that's rated for ground contact that will keep the insulation safe and will not deteriorate over time, and we can withstand rocks and all kinds of other, homeowner type activities. So turns out 3/4 inch PVC is kind of the perfect product for this. You can see we've got it installed all along the foundation here, and it is it's pretty rock solid. That's pretty tough stuff. It's rated for ground contact. It's rated to be buried in the ground. It's PVC. It doesn't take on moisture. It won't rot. It's there for the life of the house, and keeps it pretty well protected. So I think regardless of building type, this is our first time using it, and I think regardless of cladding type above, this is going to be our standby material. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's fairly easy to install. It looks great. We know that it's going to last. We know that it's going to work. And the code requires that we do something. And so I think this is probably it.
The edges of the panels are trimmed with architectural channel stock from Tamlyn. They're called Tamlyn Extreme Trim. They give the panels a clear definition, allow for slightly imperfect cuts, and they give the panels a little room to move during temperature fluctuations. That all sounds pretty easy, but it's because a lot of difficult work went into where to place that channel stock in the first place. For that, Michael used windows and other architectural elements of the house, along with some basic design rules.
It's a confluence, right, of the materials and trying to come up with some kind of a language for the house, something that is distinctive style, and pulling on existing motifs. And for me, I've always, this is Minnesota. Frank Lloyd Wright looms large here. His influence is predominantly Japanese architecture. I lived in China for a couple of years and Japan for a year, and I think that my aesthetic brings a lot of that in. So the 2/3, 1/3 rule is a really big one, and trying to make sure that we don't, I'm trying to avoid symmetry. I'm trying to make it as asymmetrical as possible and achieve balance in that asymmetry. It's much more like art than anything when it gets to this stage. It's less about problem solving or engineering and much more about flow and what that visual language is.
One of those elements is a continuous orange band above the upper windows. It gives the eye a chance to pause and absorb before looking at the rest of the composition. But while designing the exterior cladding is more like art than engineering, elements like the continuous trim band mean that it's really important that the technical team are on the same page as the artists.
I think your point, Dan, about the precision that's required when you do something like this is noted for sure. And I think when you're shooting for this level of precision, the framing crew's got to be on board with the final design. Because that's where, I mean, once it's framed and it's done, the trim guys can't come along and make it something else. And if the windows don't line up, those metal trims are going to show you right away if you miss the mark. The process for installing the Tamlyn trims and the Paint Pro panels is very much you start at the bottom and you start at a corner and you move across in one direction. The process we used was to really attack one side of the house at a time. So we did, the south elevation, then we did the east elevation, then we did the north, and then we came around and did the west. So we were very much very intentional about how that lays up. So so there's a process in order. You start in one side and you move across and up. The installation of the panels themselves, we're using the Cortex screws. We're going right through the face of the Paint Pro panel. Where we have the Paint Pro panels, we have the Home Slicker Max, the Benjamin Obdyke Home Slicker Max. So we're not worried about furring strips. We don't need to land on any particular point. And our fastening base is that Zip R12, that 7/16 OSB. We're not going back and looking for studs. That's huge. Right. The fact that we don't have to hit furring strips, it means that we are a little more forgiving in terms of the actual where the screws land. And because all of the screws are then plugged, you can't see the screws. And so I don't have to go through and mark precisely each screw so that when I look at it, I have this perfect vertical line. That's huge. Pinning the edges is the most important thing. So it's 12-inch pinning pattern around the perimeter and 16 in the field.
The question everyone is asking to their screens right now is, how can you paint PVC panels dark blue and not expect them to swell up like a buffalo? So we asked exactly that question to AZEK's technical experts on the Zoom call.
PVC panels, I noticed there was a color guide for paint, and there was some comments about if you're using a regular latex paint, keep your color render within these parameters. If you're using a vinyl specific paint, you get a little more bandwidth. And if we use the Aqua SureTech product, which we're using in this project, sky's the limit. You can paint it dark black. So help me understand how heat and pigment and panel, what's going on there?
Okay, so that's a good one. So if you ever, let's say you got online and Googled, the question that comes, when does vinyl siding start to soften, right? Or when does vinyl siding start to distort, right? You start to look at polymers and PVCs, and what you'll find out is it's about 140 to 145 degrees. When the core of any plastic material starts to get over those temperatures, that's when the shrinking effect I told you starts to go on a very steady curve like this and starts to go like this. And then depending on the maximum temperature, that hits a plateau and starts to go back like this again. So essentially, let's just say you had a core of the product only saw 120 degrees. That plateau would be looking like this forever, right? So it could be 200 years and you'd never see enough shrinkage in in the naked eye of the material, even though that product is shrinking over time. The minute you get over that 140 degree mark, that line starts to go like this to like that. And what any manufacturer that makes plastic wants to avoid this. We all want this.
Got it.
So when we talk about the coatings, what we're doing is we're trying to limit the heat build in the core of those products so that they don't get in excess of 145 degrees, because that's kind of like the magic number for any plastic manufacturer, so that you don't see shrinkage in materials. So that's the reason behind the special paint and the requirements there. It's all about heat build.
How does the special paint stop the buildup of heat? I mean, if it's a dark paint, is there like some kind of barrier or reflective? How does the paint?
So that's a good question. So if we went through our painting requirements, the first one is we tell customers to look for the LRV of the color that they choose. And LRV is a light reflective value. And as long as that value is above 55, you can use 100% acrylic latex paint. Essentially what that's saying is that there's enough sunlight and heat that's reflected off of those lighter colors that it doesn't get to those heat build temperatures that we don't want to see. The next step is we allow for vinyl safe formulas of 100% acrylic latex paint. So if you go to Sherwin-Williams, they have the ability to mix their paints in vinyl safe formulas. What that means is they essentially take two pigments out. They take gunpowder out and they take black. And those are obviously the two pigments that produce the most amount of heat build. So they remove those two pigments and they replace them with other pigments to get to the same color. Sherwin-Williams has done a phenomenal job on the retail level to provide vinyl safe formulas where they remove those heat build pigments out. And then the last one is Aqua SureTech, and they make what's called heat reflector solar reflective pigments. And essentially what they're doing, they have the ability to make black paints that produce similar heat builds to coatings with LRVs at 55 or greater by putting additives in that coating that actually reflect the sunlight away from it so it doesn't absorb that heat. Whereas your basic black and umber absorbs the heat, those coatings actually reflect it and reflect the solar and the sun away. So it's almost like, adding a mirror, so like flakes of mirror to your paint. That's not really what it is, but that's essentially what they're doing so that you don't build heat.
So the AZEK sheets with Paint Pro technology wrap up the outside of the building resilience envelope, and all that's left to do now is to heckle Michael as he finishes everything off with an oddly shaped deck. He'll use the same material for decking that was used on the open joint cladding system, only it'll be a little darker. We're also going to walk down memory lane to when we began the project and explore all the things that made us happy for resilience during the span of the project.
Looks beautiful. It's fantastic. It's fast, dried in. It's a bomber.
While the house was built for resilience, the world tested people's resilience too since we broke ground. And we're going to invite one of our Instagram pals on the show to talk about her personal journey of resilience as a woman of color in the construction world.
And also you're using Festool, like all of your tools. Yeah. So I'm actually not related to resilience necessarily, but I'm just curious, who was it that went and said, hey, you're new to the trades, you should go out and buy the most expensive, best performing tools first?
The short story is that I did a lot of research, and I had a friend of mine who was also doing the research at the same time. And actually he found the Festool brand and was, just watching all these videos. I, on the other hand, had 4 kids to raise. And so, I'm very good at saying to people, okay, what's the best? You get told what the best is, and I listened to that advice. And in carpentry, best equals time management. And I did know that. I feel like when you buy crappy tools, they are so frustrating, and you can't really learn on a crappy tool because sometimes the tool's so crappy that it can be, it's not calibrated, so you're not going to get a 90-degree cut. And a lot of people don't understand that 90-degree cut or an 87-degree cut on all corners makes a pretty interesting looking box. And, pretty much all of furniture is just, an amalgam of boxes.
In the meantime, stay tuned and stay resilient.